A script, a set, actors playing parts. But the darkness they brought to life on screen didn't stay on screen. Some say the curse of The Exorcist began the moment cameras started rolling. Others believe it started long before, when the idea itself was born. What no one expected was that the film would leave behind a trail of real death, unexplained accidents, and something no priest could ever cleanse. In 1971, William Peter Blatty published his novel, The Exorcist, based loosely on a real case of demonic possession. It was disturbing, controversial, and impossible to ignore. Hollywood jumped on it. Director William Friedkin signed on. Blatty adapted the screenplay himself, but the deeper they got into the story, the more things began to unravel. Even before filming began, there were signs. The set of the McNeil house caught fire and burned to the ground. Every room was destroyed, except one, Reagan's bedroom, where the exorcism scenes would be filmed. It was untouched. Production halted for weeks. Friedkin brought in a real priest to bless the set, but the tension had already taken root. During filming, lead actress Ellen Burstyn suffered a permanent spinal injury when she was yanked backwards in a harness for a stunt. Her scream in the film? It wasn't acting. It was real pain. Actor Jack McGowran, who played Burke Dennings, died suddenly after finishing his scenes. So did Vasiliki Maliaros, who played the possessed girl's mother. Neither lived to see the film's release. In total, 9 people connected to the production died before or shortly after the film's release. Camera operators, technicians, actors. Even Linda Blair, who played Reagan, was injured repeatedly. She later said, "There were times it felt like something else was with us on that set. Something we couldn't see." When The Exorcist premiered in 1973, chaos followed. Audiences fainted, some vomited. Paramedics were called to multiple screenings. In one theater, a man passed out and broke his jaw on the seat in front of him. He later sued Warner Brothers, claiming the film was too horrifying to be released. Church groups protested. Theaters gave out barf bags. And still, people came, drawn like moths to a flame. What caused all of it? Some blame coincidence. Others say the subject matter invited real demonic attention. A few crew members even admitted they felt watched while filming, not by people, but by something they couldn't explain. Director Friedkin stayed quiet about the deeper rumors, but years later, he admitted, "There were things on that set I still can't explain, and I don't want to." To this day, The Exorcist remains one of the most terrifying films ever made, not just for what it shows, but for what happened to the people who made it. Was it just a string of tragedies, a side effect of stress and long hours, or did something truly unholy attach itself to the story and follow those who dared to bring it to life? They say when you stare into the abyss stares back. But The Exorcist didn't just stare. It opened the door, and something walked through. Some films crossed the line between fiction and something far more disturbing. Poltergeist was never just a ghost story. It was a warning, one the cast and crew ignored until it was too late. Movie released in 1982, Poltergeist shocked audiences with its groundbreaking special effects and terrifying imagery. A suburban home, a cursed television, and a little girl whispering, "They're here." But behind the cameras, something even darker was lurking, and it all started with a single decision. In one of the film's most iconic scenes, actress JoBeth Williams falls into a rain-filled pit, surrounded by decomposing corpses. She believed they were plastic. They weren't. The props department used real human skeletons, shipped from medical suppliers. At the time, real bones were cheaper than fabricating fakes. No one on set thought twice, until the deaths began. Shortly after the film wrapped, Dominique Dunn, who played the teenage daughter, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. He strangled her in her own driveway. She never regained consciousness. She was just 22. 4 years later, Heather O'Rourke, the blonde-haired child who played Carol Ann, the heart of the series, died suddenly. Doctors initially thought it was the flu, but it was septic shock caused by a misdiagnosed intestinal blockage. She was only 12. She died just before the release of Poltergeist 3. Audiences watched her final performance, knowing she was already gone. Between the first and third films, 4 cast members died unexpectedly. Julian Beck, the terrifying preacher Cain in Poltergeist 2, died from stomach cancer. Will Sampson, who performed a spiritual cleansing of the set, died post-surgery in ways the hospital couldn't explain. 2 other actors, crew members, and family relatives suffered fatal accidents or unexplained illnesses. The producers denied any curse. They said it was superstition, bad luck. But JoBeth Williams later admitted she had strange experiences on set. Objects in her dressing room moved on their own. She felt something watching her. She said she'd never felt safe filming the movie, and she didn't know about the real skeletons until much later. Today, Poltergeist is remembered as one of the greatest horror films ever made. But for those who worked on it, it's remembered as something else. A set where the dead were used like props, where superstition became reality, and where those who entered didn't all walk away. The studio never apologized. The bones were never identified, and the spirits, they never left. When you use the dead to tell stories about the dead, they tend to respond. Sometimes with whispers, sometimes with warnings, and sometimes with something far worse. It was supposed to be a feel-good family comedy. 3 bachelors, 1 baby, harmless, lighthearted fun. But hidden inside a single frame of that film was something that no one could explain, something that never should have been there. A boy in a black suit, standing perfectly still behind a curtain, watching. 3 Men and a Baby was released in 1987. It starred Tom Selleck, Ted Danson, and Steve Guttenberg. It was a box office hit. Funny, sweet, family-friendly. But shortly after its VHS release, a rumor began to spread. A viewer paused the tape during a quiet apartment scene and saw something. In the background, behind a sheer white curtain, stood a boy, expressionless, still, unmoving, and no one could explain it. The film's producers were contacted, reporters asked questions, fan forums exploded with theories. There had been no child actors scheduled that day, no extras. No one remembered seeing a boy on set. It wasn't in the script, and it certainly wasn't a special effect. The only explanation the studio eventually gave was that it must have been a cardboard cutout of Ted Danson's character, left behind from a deleted subplot. But the cutout? It didn't look anything like the figure in the curtain, and that only deepened the mystery. Then came the urban legend. Viewers began to claim the movie was shot in an actual apartment complex in New York, and that years earlier, a boy had died in that very room. Some said he'd fallen out of a window. Others claimed he'd been locked in the room and starved. They believed his spirit lingered, and during filming, he made himself known. But here's the truth. The film wasn't shot in an apartment. It was filmed entirely on a soundstage in Toronto. There was no apartment, no tragic history, no real ghost boy, right? Years later, the actors were asked about the figure. Ted Danson laughed it off, said he didn't remember any cardboard cutouts. Tom Selleck was more cautious. He admitted the figure was creepy and said if it had been real, he never would have gone back on that set. Steve Guttenberg refused to comment. Decades later, viewers still pause that moment, freeze frame it, zoom in, and the more you look at the boy in the curtain, the less fake he seems. He doesn't look like a cutout. His posture is unnatural. His eyes are too deep, too empty, and the curtain, it moves slightly, as if something behind it had shifted just before the camera cut away. The image has been studied by ghost hunters, debunkers, skeptics, believers. No one has reached a conclusion, and the studio has never offered another explanation. Was it a marketing stunt, a mistake, a visitor from somewhere else? All we have is that single frame and a chilling feeling that someone was there, watching, waiting, unnoticed, until it was too late. Sometimes, the scariest ghosts aren't the ones you hear. They're the ones that just appear, not in the dark, but in plain sight. 3 films, 3 stories, 3 brush strokes of terror painted across the silver screen. But behind the lights, behind the lens, a question remains. Or has something always been watching from the shadows of Hollywood, feeding off fear, tragedy, and fame? Let's step back. In The Exorcist, actors died before the film even premiered. A fire destroyed the set, but left the exorcism room untouched. Audience members fainted, cried, collapsed, and one man sued because the terror left him bleeding. In Poltergeist, real human skeletons were used like props, and then the cast started dying. Suddenly, mysteriously, one by one. The girl who whispered "they're here" never made it to her teenage years, and in Three Men and a Baby, a ghostly figure appears in one frame. No explanation, no script, no actors scheduled, just a boy, frozen in time. Are these isolated events? Or are we seeing the fingerprints of something far more sinister? Some believe film sets, with their intense emotions, long hours, and repeated reenactments of violence and trauma, become magnets for spiritual energy. When you recreate death, when you scream in terror again and again, when you pretend to summon something evil, sometimes it listens, and sometimes it answers. These aren't the only stories. On the set of The Omen, lightning struck a plane, twice. The Crow saw actor Brandon Lee shot and killed with what was supposed to be a blank. Rosemary's Baby was followed by illness, accidents, and even the death of its composer. Behind the glamour of the film industry-wide is a trail of unexplained deaths, whispers in dressing rooms, cold spots on closed stages, and haunted prop warehouses where no one wants to be alone after dark. Some directors refuse to work on horror films. Some actors demand their sets be blessed before filming. Some refuse to even speak of the legends, because once a story takes hold, it's almost impossible to shake it. Skeptics will say it's all chance, accidents, urban legends, misremembered timelines. Our brains love patterns, especially when they scare us. But believers, they say Hollywood made a deal long ago, that the price of fame, success, and cinematic immortality is attention. From the other side, they whisper that some films don't just tell scary stories, they become them. So the next time you watch a horror movie, ask yourself, is what you're seeing just fiction? Or are you watching something that left a very real mark on this world? Because stories have power, and sometimes the scariest ones are true. Sleep well,